Okay, welcome back. I'm going to move on to the relationship between NLP and typology. From a descriptive linguistics perspective, we study typology to answer the questions: what language structures are possible, what language structures are common, and to take the pithy explanation from Balthasar Pickel, what's, where, why, which means which structures are in which positions in the world and what is the history or relationship that has led to those distributions. From an NLP perspective, we're getting slightly different things out of typology. What language structures are possible leads us to ask, are there certain formal patterns that I can reuse when I change my application from one language to another? What language structures are common can tell me which phenomenon I'm almost certain to need to consider and which ones are maybe more marginal. And the what's, where, why question can tell me, how do I narrow down which linguistic structures are most important for an application? So if I'm working on something for a multilingual context in Southeast Asia, if I know that a linguistic phenomenon is typical to Europe and not really typical outside of Europe, then I might not need to worry about it so much. So going back to my case study of coordination in Nuuchahnulth, is that coordination more widespread than just this one strange language in the Northwest? The answer is yes. The discontinuous structure that I showed you, where the object is split off from its verb, is nearly identical to verb coordination in Uyghur. Uyghur is a Turkic language spoken in Western China. Serial verb constructions, or covert coordination, is quite common globally. It's present in Standard Mandarin, it's present in Thai, it's present in Yoruba, and many others. It just happens to not be very present in Western European languages. The concept of multiple parts of speech being predicative is perhaps more common than is typically known. So at least between Uyghur and Nuuchahnulth, different constructions break down based on the same event interpretation. So coordination, which is at the same time or of the same event, in both Uyghur and Nuuchahnulth permit this order of verb 1, verb 2, and then finally the object of the first verb. But in both languages, once coordination is sequential in time or not of the same event, then that object separation becomes ungrammatical, and it is required to say the same construction as verb 1, object of verb 1, and then verb 2. So is this really just two unrelated languages on different parts of the planet randomly happen to have the same linguistic typology? I kind of doubt it, but I don't know that this has been looked into in detail yet. And could a deeper semantic representation resolve syntactic problems in coordination? So very often NLP does not look at deep semantics, but here you kind of have to ask the question, are these the same event? Are they sequential? And then once you get that, the grammatical structure becomes more understandable. And then I talked about predicative parts of speech. In Nuuchahnulth, nouns, verbs, and adjectives are all predicative. And this is a very long recognized areal pattern in the Pacific Northwest. All of these languages have what have been called, quote unquote, verby nouns, or everything is a verb. And is this actually all that unusual? I came into this research thinking the answer was yes. I'm now less certain of that. In my current work at the Out of Asia project at the University of Zurich, one of our typological questionnaires is looking at whether nouns can be used as a predicate without marking. So no be verb, no affix. You can just use a noun as a predicate. We have very heavy sampling in the Americas because the project is called Out of Asia, so we're looking at links between the Americas and Asia. We've currently coded only 104 languages out of a planned 319 for this feature. But I already have some interesting results. So 65 of these 104 languages have predicative nominals at least some of the time. So that's more than half. 41 of these 65 have unconditional predicative nominals, kind of like Nuuchahnulth. And 18 out of 65 go even further and allow verbal tense to appear on the noun. So wasn't this supposed to be uncommon? Wasn't this just a phenomenon of this corner of the world? Maybe it isn't. Maybe predicative nominals are quite common. And if we look at languages we might be more familiar with, we can see how this might be more common than we expect. Both Russian and Arabic have what has sometimes been called copula dropping, which is limited to the present tense clause. I'm going to try my best to pronounce these and ask for forgiveness from Russian and Arabic speakers. But the way to say she is home in Russian is something like ona doma, she home, and there's no is verb. And you can do the same thing in Arabic, Umaru mu'allimun, Omar is a teacher. Again, there's no be verb. In these languages, this can only happen in the present tense. But if we look at this and say, well, these languages have something missing, that be verb has dropped out, then we miss out that these constructions in Russian and Arabic might be part of a much wider phenomenon. And if we instead look at it as allowing nouns to be eventive or predicative, in Russian and Arabic, we have this in a certain context, which is the present tense. This is the most common restriction. And in Nuuchahnulth, you can do it whenever you want, regardless of tense. So maybe we're actually looking at the same phenomenon, and our bias of having languages, of knowing languages where the copula is always required, like English, leads us to think that Russian and Arabic have something missing and that Nuuchahnulth is exotic. Why should NLP researchers care about all of this? I think instead of treating this as copula dropping, as something that you have to handle once for Russian, once for Arabic, once for Quechua, where it's also present, once for Nuuchahnulth, we might actually be looking at the same phenomenon that just has different conditions. And it typically has a condition like present tense, but very often it will have a no conditioning at all, or a much more complicated conditioning. Typological research can lead to reusable analyses for multilingual NLP. So as NLP becomes more multilingual, which I think everyone is more and more interested in these days, typological research will serve the function syntactic research did for monolingual NLP. When English-only NLP is dependent upon syntactic analyses present in things like the Penn Tree Bank, multilingual NLP is going to become more and more dependent, I think, on typological surveys and typological data.